Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Ansony Sieh, your host, the Hour of Politics, focus on Liberia, broadcasting from our headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome. Do us that usual favor. If you have not shared the broadcast yet, please do. Someone from the ANC told me she is the lioness of the ANC. I think I'm tempted to believe that. Antony Yakula is my guest. She is former COS to Mr. Alexander Benedict Cummings. Mr. Cummings, I know for a fact, is a presidential hopeful. He tried the last time, he landed a shot. He's keeping his eyes on the ball. Is he our guy? Will he be our guy? What is in him that we can take that for him to be our president for the nation Liberia? Welcome. The topic for today's discussion, Alexander Cummings, the political leader / presidential hopeful. At this time, I will welcome my guest. I don't know her that much, but I'll go Liberia and say, my dear sister, Antony Yakula, welcome to the Hour of Politics and Focus on Liberia. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Ansony.
All right. How is family, by the way? I understand you in California where it's always hot. We get fire all the time. Are you staying away from trouble there?
I'm trying my best, but I like good trouble. So you got to define the kind of trouble. I don't stay away from good trouble, but I'm trying my best to stay out of bad trouble. California is good. The weather is a fraud. Some days it's cold. Like, oh, I thought it's supposed to be hot.
Right.
Yeah, but it's pretty good.
All right, excellent. I am in Minnesota. I don't know if you know where it's always cold. We should be.
I don't know how you do it.
And sometimes I say I don't know how we do it, but it is what it is.
A short story. I did my undergrad in Michigan.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And I was there for 3.5 years. And I went during spring, summer, so the weather was nice. Like summertime, the weather was nice. The first winter, Ansony, when that cold hit me, I used to look at the dorm room, I look at the snow on the ground, look at the weather, I say, I'm not going on Saturday. I'm going on Saturday. I literally did not go to class like that semester as much as I went the other semesters, my GPA plunged. But the cold, I was depressed. I was cold. I couldn't do it. And when I graduated, I'm like, if I ever come back to the US to go to school, I'm going to a warmer state. I can't do so Michigan, Minnesota, like I don't know how you do it. I can't do it.
I know. It gets tough, and you had your own experience, and so do I. And you are not wrong there. It gets very tough. I don't know how we do it here. Hey, we can welcome you enough, and also our many listeners out there. So please do us their favor. We are here to talk about Mr. Alexander Benedict Cummings. I continue to remind our people, Mariah, that the search for leadership for our country should not be taken for a joke. You've been around a little bit, to know that leadership has not been something Liberians can be proud of, given our history. Many people have let us down. So I am on this search. I'm yelling. I'm trying to find who's going to be that person to put us on that path, right, to a better state of a nation that we can all be proud of. Well, let's get to it and stop wasting time. I have some questions. What sets Mr. Cummings apart from all other candidates? I also want to know what are Mr. Cummings' plans for Liberia. I also want to know whether Mr. Cummings understands Liberia's problems. And I also want to know, even if he got the problems understood well and has the best plans ever, is he going to win to implement these plans? So our discussion for today was centered around that. But let's get started. You've worked with Mr. Cummings. You have that privilege to do so. Who have you come to know him to be?
Um, and I usually, it's good you use the word privilege because
Mhm,
that's the word I usually use. It's
mhm,
been a privilege to work with Mr. Cummings that closely to
mhm,
earn his trust as well. And to see him firsthand exhibit the kind of leadership that I want to see in the president
mhm,
that a lot of people don't see, and also to see the fun part of him that sometimes he doesn't let a lot of people see or the public to see. But Mr.
mhm,
Cummings is a very honest person. That's one thing that he holds dearly, honesty. He's not a politician, and I tell people that because sometimes they'll say politicians lie a lot, lawyers lie a lot, or whatever other perceptions out there. But Mr. Cummings is not a politician. He's a consummate professional, an administrator, a leader, and so he struggles with the Liberian politics that requires you to lie in some cases, or to close your eyes to the truth. And so he doesn't know how to do that. If Mr. Cummings gave you his word, which is what people call him talk and do, he tries all the time to live up to it. And sometimes it's difficult because he wants to be able to be, to be honest. If you come and ask him for something, he'll tell you, I can't help at this time, right? And some people take it personal and say, "Oh, the man won't help me," and blah blah blah. But his thing is, if I tell you I can help you, then I must do it because that's my word. And so he's known to do what he says he will do, and that's for me. It's very key in a leader. Mr. Cummings is also humble. Most of his critics, carry the propaganda around that he's arrogant, he's this, he's that. And I usually ask, do you even know him? Have you like met him, Mr. Cummings? I know he drives himself. Sometimes people don't know that on weekends. Sometimes he drives himself. He tells the security and his drivers, to take the day off. He'll drive himself around Monrovia. I've seen Mr. Cummings. He hasn't done it in Monrovia, but even in the U.S., he will go to the supermarket himself. He lives an ordinary life. He tries as much as possible to just be himself and not let the trappings. And I remember one of the things he told me was, Mariah, when I was Coke executive, the second person at Coke, one of the things I tried not to do was to allow the trappings of the job to affect me. The private jets, the business class rides, the access to, all of those things that come with being who he was. And he said, because I knew that at some point I would retire and I would have to live a life, of my own. And so he still remained basic. He still remains humble. And I remember about a year into working for him, he had his iPhone and the case was fading. And I said, "But Chief, you will not change your iPhone case?" And he said, "What's wrong with it? It's still useful." And I said, "But it's fading." He said, "But it's still protecting my phone." And that's the kind of person he is, And for me, it was important because he could have changed his case as many times, regarding as many cases. It's just a phone case. But for him, it was effective. I've seen Mr. Cummings wear clothes that he's worn since 2016. And he still has them. I'll be like, I'll tell Mr. Cummings we got to hide that shirt. He's like, why? It's still useful. So that's, the kind of person he is. He's also a visionary. And we'll talk about his visions for Liberia as well. And so I won't go into it. He's the hardest working person that I know. And I say this with all humility. I've worked with lot of hardworking people, Madam Mirabel, at the MPA, Madam Matilda Parker. I've had the opportunity, at Heritage. I've worked with Councilor Warners, and these are hardworking people. And
mhm.
if I tell you that Mr. Cummings is one of the hardest working people I've worked with, I
So you
will. I
think he worked the hardest among these people that you have also worked with?
I would say yes. And they all work really hard, but it's superlative because I'll tell you something, right? When
Mhm,
Mirabel, I never left Mirabel in the office. because she worked hard. I mean, she would be in the office up to 10, 11 and would be there and stuff. And then when she's leaving, we'll all leave together. And sometimes she'll say, y'all go, y'all don't have to stay, y'all go, right? Mr. Cummings, it was hard not to leave Mr. Cummings in the office because sometimes he's working up to 1 in the morning. And I'll give you a prime example. My birthday last year, and he had a show on Spoon Talk.
Spoon Talk.
It was around 10 and it ran late, up to around 11, right? And so I'm thinking like, right after the show, I go, oh, it's my birthday at midnight. And after the show, he's like, Anthony, we got to prep for he had a speech the next morning to give at UMU University graduation. He was the commencement speaker. And that's one of the things he does. He practices all his speech. And he said, we got to, practice for the speech and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. So I was like, okay, and we stayed in the office up to past midnight, 1 o'clock. And he was over and over going through his speeches. And so he works hard. I know when we go on trips out of town, many times I would sit in the car and be like, I'm tired, but he would ever stop. Mr. Cummings would get down, talk to people, meet people, have meetings, and he would be like nonstop, not tired. And I think part of that is also he has a good exercise regimen. He exercises 3 times a week. He eats a good diet, and he's very healthy. So, his energy level is high. It's even higher than mine, but he's very hardworking.
So Mariah, just for the understanding of our audience, the Liberianness about us Liberians, if I can put it that way, Mr. Cummings, because of his executive background, some people think that he is not that Liberian that they know a Liberian to be. Do you get that sense when you are with him? And also, is he a shy person?
So I don't get that sense, but I can understand why they would get that sense, and I will explain that shortly.
Right.
For over 40 years, Mr. Cummings worked and excelled in corporate America, private sector, right?
Right.
He's used to everything being structured. Meetings. If Mr. Cummings Mr. Cummings can even schedule calls. You say, Ansony, I will call you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Mr. Cummings will call you, right? Because that's what he's used to, and he's used to that structure being in place where he respects people's time. He's never late. And he was on Spoon the other day, and someone was like, "Oh, Mr. Cummings not coming. He ran away almost 10 minutes." And it was good when Stanton came on. He said, "Mr. Cummings been here over 16 minutes." He's always on time. Because he respects people's time. He likes that structure. And for us in Liberia, we like informal way of approach, right? I know I've even had senators, leaders who've complained to me and said, Mr. Cummings is a bit too formal. And Mr. Cummings will tell me, oh, I will call you at 3 o'clock tomorrow. And he will call 3 o'clock tomorrow. He doesn't need to schedule calls with me. Like, he can call me at any time. Sometimes he can just call me and say, oh, I know the wife cooked today. I'm coming over at your house. But Mr. Cummings will not invite himself at your house.
So Mariah, knowing
That's
that.
not, so I can understand why they'll say that. But being with him, he is like not even like that, Mr. Cummings. The first things first is he's a very humorous person. He has a wicked sense of humor. Mr. Cummings would tease, he would vogue, he would it's you always laughing when you're around him, especially when he really tease you. But he is an introvert. And sometimes you say he's shy, but he is an introvert. Mrs. Cummings is more of the extrovert. So even if you went out to like events or functions and stuff, she would be the one working the room, talking to people around. Mr. Cummings would probably just be in his corner. And most people would be like, oh, the man stuck up and stuff. But he doesn't know how to get into your personal space like Liberians. They don't respect.
Is he working on that? Is he working on that, Morale? Let me jump in here because
hold
on, Morale. I too had my own personal experience with him.
Right.
I was invited by Ansony. It was the Maryland. Yes, Maryland. And it was this retreat, and we went there. And so he was in a corner talking with other people, and those of us who were invited were just going back and forth, and he was still there. And I am this crazy guy. People think I'm false, and maybe I am. I said, but the man for whom we here is sitting over there. And so I went to Remington Gray. I said, hey, you have to tell Mr. Cummings to come out here. People are here for him. Let him greet them. And Remy Gray went there and he came and he said, "Oh, gentlemen, I'm sorry. I'm trying to be a better politician." And he admitted, and he shook our hands and he stood there and started greeting other people.
Yeah.
So that
He
is
is
something he needs
working
to
on
work
it.
on. Is he working on that?
Oh yes, he's working on it and he's done. I think because for him, it was a struggle, it's a bit of a struggle because
Mhm.
it's really about respect and respecting people's personal space and respecting, like Liberians, we don't really like follow that as much. We're also informal and all. So
Right.
you come, group of people standing, you just kind of morning, my man, hello, how you doing? But he feels like that's the
Well,
people's
that is the
personal.
Liberian thing, and
Exactly.
maybe that's why people
So,
criticize.
but so I'll tell you something. I remember one day I went to work
Right.
and the driver said, "Boss lady, guess what happened last night?" I said, "What happened?" He said, "We're coming from bringing the chief on dinner." And he saw a group of people in front of the gate, like in the community. And he
Right.
said, "What happened?" And they said, "Oh, they're having a wake." And he said, "But why stop me and stop the car down here?" And he got out and went to the wake keeping, and he was there with the people for like almost an hour, and everybody was like, "Oh, Mr. Cummings here, Mr. Cummings here." I was like, that's good. So he's understanding like the Liberian psychic in a way that people, there are no boundaries in terms of how you
And,
interact with
and,
people
and will
and
you
stuff.
say that has worked against him for some time, a little
I
bit?
think it has,
Mhm.
in honesty, because a lot of people misinterpret it. Like I said, they will say, "Oh, he's arrogant," or "He's stuck up," or "He's this." But in essence, he's really just respectful of people's personal spaces, and he's just respectful of people. But if you like invite him, he will show up, and he will be there, and he will talk to people, and he's very very down to earth. So that's one thing. And you probably will know that, like most people who have this perception of Mr. Cummings, it
Mhm.
changes when they meet him. I've had people come to meetings and after the meeting, they're like, "Oh, Mr. Cummings, is like the way we thought you was." So changes completely. And even with people around him, one of the things that I wanted to say that I've seen firsthand is he's a leader in the sense that he's very open to criticism. He doesn't take anything personal.
That was going to be my next question, so
Right.
allow me to ask that.
As
Like for me, I have chosen to just criticize everybody. And sometimes, if that is something you've chosen to do for this, but this guy does not have a job, I have been criticizing all our leaders. I'll always find something and just open it. Even when there's nothing that I'm looking for something. The question is, how has he been able to take all the criticism being thrown at him for some time now?
Oh, very well. Look, and that's what I was going to say. People
Mhm.
will say, "Oh, the people around Mr. Cummings can tell him the truth and stuff." Anthony, there have been many days Mr. Cummings and I have disagreed, and he doesn't take it personally. Even people around him, in fact, he listens to his people around him.
Mhm.
He encourages criticism.
Mhm.
If Mr. Cummings is supposed to make a decision, he asks all of his team members, "What's your POV? What's your point of view?" He wants to hear a point of view, and he may not always take it. Which is, but the point is, it's not like he's asking you because you know you want him to do what you want him to do. No, he wants the different POVs. He takes them and he makes a decision. But he is very open to criticism. Mr. Cummings does not shun people. In fact, he encourages it because he knows that it helps him to be a better person. And I'll tell you, one time, somebody was like, "Oh, Mr. Cummings doesn't make decision, and he lets his party make decision and stuff," which was, you know. And I was like, "So, do you want a dictator?" Because Mr. Cummings, as head of the ANC, does not make decisions for the party. The ANC has an executive committee that makes decisions for the party. And, of let's be honest, in politics, sometimes the leader, you will influence sometimes the decisions and you have conversations with people, try to meet consensus with your executive members to sometimes get the results you want. But when it comes to respecting the decisions of the party, he does. I remember when this whole framework document thing started and they were going to form this committee, and the four leaders sat down and formed a committee, and he went back to update the party executives, and they told him straight up, "Mr. Cummings, that's wrong. Nothing in the framework document gives the full political leaders the authority to appoint investigative committee. That authority is in the National Advisory Council as a body and not the full political leaders. Other political leaders would say, we made a decision and that's it, right?
Right.
Mr. Cummings went back to his colleagues and said, I think we made a mistake. Like we, you know, they didn't have the authority to do this. And some of them still objected to him. It's like, oh, we already made a decision. He's like, no. But that was him listening to his executive committee and his party. So if it's right, he will listen. If it's, criticism that he didn't do something right or he did something or whatever, he always takes it. And it's not personal. And sometimes you guys like talk show host or whatever, and you know, of course, his supporters will get upset, and sometimes I think it's sometimes they just look for unnecessary things to criticize. But he doesn't take it personal as a leader because he thinks criticism as well as commendations is all part of the role he finds himself in. So yeah.
And finally, before we go to the into the main discussion here, I want to. He continued to say he's blessed, and we all know that for a fact, right? And he has started this journey. He wants to be president. I watched a video sometimes back, I think it was in Maryland, and these individuals were yelling at him, right? And he you know how when you give somebody that look, it tells us all, but you have to compose yourself. And then what I got from that was this is a man who is in his country. It is a right to compete, and he's like he's being insulted. And sometimes I feel that, well, does he really need this? Because he's well enough and he will still live a better life, but he has to endure all of this from other people. And sometimes it's that feeling that, you know what, this is that I don't think I deserved it. Has he ever come to that point and to being down?
No. Sometimes the most he will say is, this gets tiring, but he's never lost hope, in his belief and trust in the Liberian people to do the right thing. And you're right. Sometimes I think it's unfair to him, the level of insults he gets, the betrayal, the backstabbing from people who he's been there for, who he's done, so much for, um, from the kindness of his heart. And I know that so many people who even don't support him, who he knows don't support him, he helps. He reaches out to, he's there for, and he's never asked them for support. He will know that you support John Brown or Peter Paul, and if you went to him, he will still help you because his kindness and his help to people is not based on political support. And sometimes he gets the slack from his supporters and partisans. It's like, oh, you doing this for people who would never support you publicly and stuff. And he said, at the end of the day, it's about making people's lives better, and it's not about what I get out of it personally. And like you said, he is blessed. Mr. Cummings has never said I'm rich or I'm wealthy. He always say I'm blessed. First, I'm blessed to be a Liberian. I'm blessed to have worked and made a life for myself and my family. And he just wants to give back to his country. He wants to serve. He wants to help the country develop and move forward. And he's seen, that it's possible. He's built and helped grow companies, Fortune 500 companies, from Pillsbury, where he was the youngest director at age 36, to Coca-Cola Africa, where he started as the regional for Coca-Cola Africa, the whole of Africa, and then moved on to Coca-Cola Global, where then he became the chief administrative officer and number two, handling over operations, Coca-Cola operations in over 200 countries around the world. Which brings me to another thing: he barely sleeps. And I was like, gee, why he can sleep? He's like, right, I had to deal with different time zones for over 20 plus years, because when it's morning in one country, it's evening or afternoon in the other. And he had to supervise all of them and travel across the world. So he's seeing that it's possible. He's handled, budgets and grown budgets are way 10, 20, 50 times more than Liberia's budget. He's worked with governments on the African continent. And I tell people, sometimes you say, oh, this man is just in business. He doesn't understand how government works. And I said, do you know how corporations work with governments? Especially these big corporations, in terms of the work with governments, in terms of subsidies, in terms of tax breaks, in terms of government operations, bureaucracies, and seeing what are those bottlenecks and how to open them up and all of those things. So, which is why he's grown a network of presidents, of corporate leaders, of people who have so much respect for him, even across the continent. And I know someone was talking about it the other day, and they said, the South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, respects Mr. Cummings, knows him. Rwandan president, respects him, knows him. Ghanaian president. But what the person didn't say was, this was when Mr. Cummings was working as head of Coca-Cola Africa. He had relationships with all of these people. The current Ghanaian president was then, I think, the foreign minister at the time. The South African president was a bottler for Coca-Cola. He's a businessman. The Rwandan president, Kagame at the time, was also. So all of these people were in the governments, right? And he built relationships with them that he still maintains to today. And that's what happens when you have someone who's a leader and who people respect and who people. So yes, as much as he gets the criticism, as much as he gets the insults, as much as he gets everything that comes in this space, he's never lost hope because he really thinks when given the opportunity, he can help to move this country forward.
And finally, you, the handlers, you in his close proximity, the criticism that you get from us and actually directed at Mr. Cummings is that you are the one pulling in your part. He's listening to you and you are telling him all the wrong things. How is he dealing with that?
Like what? So that's what I need to ask. Like, what are the wrong things?
For example, some people hold strongly that it was those of you who are handling him who said, well, it's okay for him to work with somebody like Musa Belete, joining the CPP, making decisions like the press conference that were approved by Alosha to give, and I played earlier, so for you to hear some of the toxic language that was in there, things like that.
So let me start with a press conference Alosha still gave. Alosha is the Secretary General of the ANC, chief spokesperson and elected official. Like I said, the ANC as a party has an executive committee that makes decisions. And it's not subject to Mr. Cummings' approval. So if the ANC made a decision to clarify the lies, the propaganda, the toxic things that were said about Mr. Cummings, that's the party.
Even though that will exacerbate and already.
So who determines what? So who determines what exacerbates what? So if you think so, so I should accept the language, but I shouldn't feed it back.
So fire for
fire. Let me tell you, Ansony. Let me say this to you. You are responsible for what you say.
I agree.
You're not responsible for how I respond.
I agree.
And so if you don't want me to respond in a certain way, you got to watch what you say to me. And that applies in everything. You get what you give.
Gas in a fire, Mariah.
But you get what you give. And so Alosha still has not, he's not like a stranger to Liberian politics or civil society or standing up to tyrants or standing up to bullies and people who think they can just clamp down on other people and tarnish their names and tarnish their reputation. First of all, I listened to the video and I kept asking myself, what's the point of playing this, right? But now that we've mentioned it, I think it's good that we clarify that what you didn't do is play the toxic messaging that whoever he was responding to had been playing as well.
I heard all that. When I get the opportunity to talk to somebody from that side, I will play.
Yeah, but my point is, I'm not here to discuss them. I'm here to talk about the ANC and Mr. Cummings, and that you brought it up. Right. I support the ANC's executive committee decision for that press conference. And
it was a good decision in your opinion.
If it were to happen again, it will happen again, because at the end of the day, people need to be held accountable for the things that they say. And if you say things to people in a way that you know you would not like them to say it back to you, then you should not say it to them. So that's one. Two, let's talk about the decision you mentioned, decision to join the CPP. That was not an ANC decision, Mr. Cummings' decision, as much as it was the Liberian people's decision. We saw the call for opposition to collaborate after the 2018 elections. When this CDC government started their plundering, when they started building their homes, when they started buying homes, when they started like literally putting it in the face of the Liberian people, there was a call for opposition to collaborate. And I think that was a call in the interest of the country.
Was
The
that a
people,
blind call that you could
no, it
collaborate with
wasn't.
just about anybody,
No,
Mariah?
it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It wasn't just about anybody. If you look at the composition of the CPP, it was the
Well, the
top.
press conference
It,
said, you know,
if you look at the
Yuri
composition,
was a fraud
if
in the
you look at the composition of the CPP, it
initially.
was the top five parties outside of the CDC and MDR. So it was the top five opposition political parties
I know
outside
that.
of MDR and CDC. So it wasn't with just
But
anybody.
I
And
don't think the
and
ALP was.
and the ALP was. I mean, the ALP was the ALP. I think was also part of the opposition parties. Look at the list of parties. So
ALP, I disagree.
no, amen. So if you
Go
again,
ahead.
we can go back to NEC and see what the ALP was on the list of parties. If you were forming an opposition collaboration with the top five opposition parties, of course you will have to form a collaboration with those parties too. Mr. Cummings was not the one that made these political leaders or political parties. He's not it's the Liberian people. These are the people they chose as their leaders. These are the people that they've given their support to. And so
And
if
so
you're calling
he
for
needed to work with them
if you're
despite
calling,
whatever
if you first,
plans.
let me say something, Ansony.
Okay.
Collaboration with people does not necessarily mean people you like or people
Agree with.
you exactly. It's about the bigger picture and what the Liberian people wanted as an alternative for them. And so again, damn if you do, damn if you do, damn if you don't, right? That's the
Right.
saying. You join them. There are people who would not like it. You don't. There are people who say, "Oh, he thinks he's all that. He thinks he's this. He thinks he's that. He doesn't want to join his colleagues. He thinks he can do it on his own." Blah blah blah. So
And
either
don't you
way,
think
but the
association
bigger,
matters?
but the
All right. Don't you
bigger,
think
the
association
bigger,
matters?
the association does matter. But the bigger picture is you are doing this for the greater good of the people, and the people have got. Ansony Sieh, I
Yes.
was one of the proponents of the opposition collaboration.
I heard that.
When we started our opposition collaboration, the ALP was nowhere around it. It was ANC, LP, and UP.
And that was a great calculation, right?
So the part of the calculation was ALP had less than 2% of the votes. We didn't think it was part of like it would mean any difference to the collaboration. But
Exactly.
then when we got to the leaders, in fact, Councillor Bromskin and the late Councillor Bromskin and Vice President Boyka were the ones who brought the ALP on board. And at the end of the day, we all accepted it because it was part of the opposition collaboration. My point I'm raising is that was not a decision that you can blame Cummings handlers for. Even before then, I wasn't with the ANC. I was still affiliating with the UP at the time. I joined the ANC shortly before the entire thing came together. But you cannot blame Mr. Cummings handlers for that, nor can you blame Mr. Cummings for it. And what the opposition collaboration
And
represented.
Laura, that's what I'm
What?
finding
Let me just
difficult,
land.
right?
Let me just land.
No,
Answer
allow me
what
to
the,
ask my question. I will give you
yeah,
time.
you will ask a question, but let me
My
just
strategy
conclude.
here is to allow you to flow, but let me ask my
Yeah, but let
question
me
here.
conclude, and then you
All
can
right, go
ask the
ahead.
next question. What
Go ahead.
it represented, the ideals it represented, still exist. It doesn't change the fact that the Liberian people still need to have an opposition collaboration that can rescue them from this government's bad governance. And this also applies to the issue of the raised about his association with Mr. Ability. Who elected Mr. Ability? It's the Liberty Party. The very Darius DeLon, the very Senator Yomli Kangalans were the ones who supported Mr. Ability as chairman of the Liberty Party. If you're saying that Mr. Cummings should now work with the chairman of the Liberty Party, elected by officials of the Liberty Party, then what exactly do you want him to do? So Mr. Cummings did not go bring Mr. Benedict into the CPP. He did not bring Mr. Benedict into the Liberty Party. This is the same Mr. Benedict who was the chair of the Unity Party's Monserrato campaign. This was the same Mr. Benedict who was the chair of the Liberty Party's entire campaign for Charles Bromskin. Why didn't Liberian people say Charles Bromskin should not associate with Musa Belete? Why did they say Unity Party should not associate with Musa Belete? Why did they say Mr. Cummings should not associate with Musa Belete? When in fact, he was not the one who made Musa Belete a leader. We chose our leaders. And if we want leaders to work together, then we should be able to know the leaders that we choose.
Thank you.
Again, I hope it clears your comments about his handlers not advising him properly.
And Mariah, here's the thing. We don't get to choose our family. We don't get to choose our country. We don't get to choose, our parents, but we get to choose our friends. We get to choose our association. We get to choose the political party. Like you make a decision to join the ANC, which is, right? So I'm saying all this to say, when you are making a decision, you have to count the costs. Now, fast forward, here we are. These individuals, especially, let me use Ure as a case in point, got Mr. Cummings in court today, and there's a political price that has been paid right now. And that is why it's good for you to choose carefully who you choose to associate with, isn't it?
So in that scenario, that's Ure's issue. That is Ure who chose to take his colleague to literate the government on the silver platter. I've never seen in this country, and remind me if you've seen it, or other African countries where an presumably opposition leader took another opposition leader to the government for persecution. That's not happened. So what that says, exactly. So what that says, it speaks to the person who did that in the first place. And the questions remain is, to what effect? What's the relationship there? What's the end game? Why is an opposition leader in bed with the ruling party? Are you truly an opposition leader? What is the point of all of this? And knowing that it's a bogus case and it's not true. So that speaks to that person. It doesn't speak to the person who decided that in the interest of the country, they were going to work with people who they did not necessarily like, or they did not necessarily agree with, or they did not necessarily choose or select. So when you go, you choose the school that you go to, right?
You do.
But you don't choose your classmates. You don't. So at the end of the day, he chose.
You have the right to select a different school if you don't like the classmates.
You do. You do. That's clear. You have the right to select a different school if you don't like the classmates, but you don't initially get to choose your classmates. And so he chose to join an opposition collaboration. He didn't get to choose the members. And if, again, in the interest, and I will say this, Mr. Cummings did not necessarily agree to ALP joining the CPP, but because his other two colleagues made the case, he accepted it in the interest of working together. So let's be clear about the issue of, you working with this person or you choose to work with this person. And lastly, I just want to say, in Liberian politics, there are no angels. This is not a pool of angels we have to choose from. We as Liberians need to ask ourselves, if we are having issues with these people that we call our leaders, then why are we making them our leaders? Why are we supporting them to leaders? Why are we giving them leadership positions if we think other leaders should not work with them? That's a question for us as Liberians to ask and answer.
Folks, if you are just joining us, this is the Hour of Politics. My guest is Anthony Yakula, former Chief of Office Staff to Mr. Alexander Benedict Cummings. We are discussing Mr. Alexander Benedict Cummings, the political leader / presidential hopeful for 2023. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be talking about Mr. Cummings' plans and vision for our dear country, Liberia. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia. From education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology, Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
I'm Ansony Sieh, and you are watching Focus on Liberia. Mariah, before one can come up with a plan to a problem, one must first understand what the problem is to come up with the best plan. The question is, what is Mr. Cummings' understanding of how deep, serious of a problem or problems that we are having as a country?
So, one of the things that we need to remember is that Mr. Cummings did not drop from the sky.
Okay.
He was born in Liberia. He grew up in Liberia. He lived his entire childhood, adolescent, up to adulthood in Liberia, up to college. He went to Cottington University. And let me just backtrack. He was born at a government hospital that used to be up where Cathedral School is now. He grew up in Point Four. In fact, where they currently have the Monobrick supermarket was what the family home was.
That's my area.
Before,
I said that's my area there.
yeah, before the move to Fiamma. That's where he grew up. He went to demonstration school, which was a government school, and then went to CW, where he still have classmates from CW now that he still is in touch with and friends with. And after that, he graduated. He was president of his class, by the way, and he graduated and went to Cottington. And while at Cottington, he got an opportunity to come to the U.S. to do so he transferred, did his undergrad, went back to Liberia, worked in Liberia, worked at what is now LBDI Bank. And then at the time, Ila Celebi was the head of LBDI Bank, the former central bank governor, if you remember. And he was giving Liberians opportunities to get the master's. And he got the opportunity and came to do his master's in the U.S. And it was only because of the civil crisis that he couldn't go back. And so he stayed and then worked in corporate America and built his way up. So he has literally his entire formation, adult years and everything was in Liberia. He's been in Liberia, he's grew up in Liberia, and he knows and understands Liberia. So it's not this person who just came from nowhere and said, oh, they won't be president and they don't understand. And as early as 2003, right after the war ended, Mr. Cummings was back in Liberia. 2004, he was there. I mean, I think we just saw a recent newspaper clipping from Archie Williams' historical site that he posted about Mr. Cummings making donations to a hospital in Buchanan in 2004. This was long before anybody even knew him, and that's part of who he is. It wasn't something that was like public or anything to that sort. But he started coming back right after the war and started helping his people and investing back. And one of the persons who he was quite close to was Ambassador Boykai. And he was always here visiting him. And at one point, Ambassador Boykai even appreciated and gowned him for his services to Liberia when he was vice president in the first term. So Mr. Cummings' connection with Liberia is long-standing, and he's been always involved. Does he understand what the country issues are? Yes, which is why he knows what he wants to do to address them. One, Mr. Cummings understands that Liberia's number one issue is leadership. We have a leadership deficit. We have a leadership issue. And you mentioned earlier, we've not been able to choose good leaders in the past, and we've had issues with our leaders in the past. And that's because we have a leadership issue. We have a leadership deficit. Can he provide that leadership that we need? Yes, he believes he can, and I believe he can, and thousands of people believe he can. But the issue that we've had with our leaders are not necessarily, whether they're
Maybe educated.
yeah, because we've had educated leaders. It's not necessarily about the tribe. We've had leaders from several different tribes. It's not necessarily about, um, the beauty or the height or the weight or no. It's
Apparently, they don't just understand the problems.
right. It's about the leadership deficit and them not really understanding what Liberia needs. And so for example, things like change coming from the top down and not bottom up approach. Liberia is a society where we do what we see our leaders do.
Mhm.
And Mr. Cummings will always say, if you as minister of a ministry or head of an agency tell your employees to be at work at 8:30 and you come into work at 9 o'clock, all of them will come to work 9:50. Sorry, 8:50.
8:50, yeah.
Like 10 minutes before you come. They will not come at 8:30. They will all come at 8:50 because they know you come in 9 o'clock, right?
Mhm.
But if you tell them to come at 8:30 and you're there at 8:30 or 8:25, they will all be there by 8:20. That's the Liberian psychic, and it's true. Work ethics. If I remember when Madame Sirleaf was still president,
Mhm.
10 o'clock, you'll be passing in front of that mansion, you'll see her car parked in front of that mansion, and you know that your president is working. Sometimes you'll be feeling guilty, like, oh, working or whatever. But you know that your president is working. You know that your president is at work and trying to solve the issues affecting the country. You create confidence in that kind of
Is that
leadership.
how Mr. Cummings does it? Is he the first at the office?
Oh yeah, and not only is he the first at the office, he's the last to leave. He's the last to leave. And that for me, I personally have an issue with time. I have a bad sense of timing. I'm always late. If I think, okay, I can be somewhere in 30 minutes,
I was setting for you today to take Zoom with me.
but I'm working on it. Mr. Cummings is helping me work on it, right? If I think in my mind, I have a bad time. If I say, okay, I can be there about in 30 minutes, I'm almost like 30 minutes missing time. Like I'll be there later than that, right? But at the end of the day, I had to work on that and try to be at the office because I knew my boss was there. And many days he was waiting for me at the office, which was professional, but he knew that it was my weakness. And that's the other thing about Mr. Cummings that, I really appreciated working with him. He never made you feel inadequate.
Or he
Even
was
when
just cutting you a slack for
no,
not
no, he
being on
wasn't
time
just
sometimes.
cutting your slack. He focuses on your strengths rather than your weaknesses and helps mentor you in how you can address those weaknesses. And that is something that not a lot of leaders do. Mr. Cummings has never raised his voice at me or any of his staff. He doesn't insult or use insulting languages.
How is he going to apply that to the presidency should he be fortunate enough?
Because that's the kind of leadership that you need. You need a mentor, someone who will recognize these are your strengths and build on them. These are your weaknesses and help you address those weaknesses, right? You need someone who has respect for you, even as your boss, that the respect is mutual, that they're not yelling at you like a child or they're not insulting you like you're living with them or stuff, to have mutual respect for your staff and for people who work for you. That's the kind of leadership that Liberian needs. But
Liberians
he
love
also
it
understands that our
tough.
problem.
Mariah, Liberians love it tough. You work with Mary Bro and you know it. It have worked for Mary Bro and we all know it.
Not
So the
necessarily.
question is, how will Mr. Cummings apply the leadership style on the national level so that his directors, should he become president and ministers and all these people to fall in line for the betterment of the country?
So that's what I'm saying,
Mhm.
Ansony. Yelling, shouting, insulting people who work for you is not leadership. Let me tell you what is. Instilling fear in people is not leadership.
Mhm.
What is leadership is respect. Let me tell you, leaders who have people fear them is temporary. When they leave those positions, people don't respect them. But when leaders have people respect them, even when they leave those positions, people still respect them. Fear is never a good strategy for a leader. So that's one. Two, Mr. Cummings' leadership skill of being a mentor and helping you to improve on your strengths, helping you to improve on your weaknesses and to expand on your strengths is something that we need in Liberia. Overboard, regardless of what sector it is.
But Mariah,
Because
leadership style.
but let me learn now.
Leadership style. Hold on, Mariah. One leadership style is not sufficient in providing leadership for the whole country. Now, from the studies, is sometimes being a little more authoritative becomes necessary,
But
and
who says it's not?
mentoring becomes necessary. That's what I'm asking the question.
But being authoritative does not mean insulting and yelling at the
I'm
people
not
who work for
suggesting
you.
that.
You can be firm. It doesn't mean he's not firm. You can be
So,
firm. We've seen
so
Mr.
show me
Cummings
the
take some.
firm part of Mr. Cummings.
So, but
because
let
we
me
need a
let me
firm
let me
leader.
just. But let me come to it.
Okay.
We've seen Mr. Cummings being firm about several things. For once, just recently, his former chief of staff, Ava, he was firm in asking Ava for his vaccination.
After being
when
pressured to do so.
when the issue, no, he wasn't. In fact, Mr. Cummings asked Ava for his vaccination before the public backlash even was as high as it became. He was like immediately. He knew that at the end, once he had a conversation with Ava and he knew what the facts were,
So
he
he
asked for his
fired him.
vaccination. So let me say
He fired
that
Ava.
it takes no, there's a difference. If you ask someone for you could choose to dismiss the person and do a letter of dismissal, or you can choose to ask the person for a resignation. Because let me tell you, one of the things Mr. Cummings always say is you have to keep people's dignity. Even when he's assisting people, he doesn't like other people knowing because he wants that person's dignity to be kept intact. Even when what are you dismissing people? You have to have people keep their dignity intact. Even if you're saying no to someone, you have to do it in a way that their dignity is kept intact. And that is his policy.
And
So
how it's not
you
being
can say
solved.
but that's being firm. But just because you want to keep someone's dignity intact does not mean you're not being firm. He's been firm about certain things. And so that's something that we need to understand. And it's not one leadership style per se. Being firm, but also being respectful of the people who work with you, keeping their dignity intact, and also holding them accountable is the kind of leadership that we need. But let's go back to Liberia's issues as we were talking about. He also understands that our issues in Liberia has been division. So outside of the lack of leadership, outside of the lack of work ethics, outside of starting change from the top down instead of bottom up, he also believes some of our country's issues has been division from the beginning of our country. One group of people, and I think he's given this scenario before, talking about the bowl of rice. Only one group of people
I don't
have
know
been
where
able,
he came up
able
with
to
that
have.
bowl of rice kind of story. Every
Only
time he tells it.
Yes, and because it explains what our division is in that country and how it changes. It's almost like musical chairs. It still exists, but the players just change. So, like he always says, from the beginning of our country, there's always been division. One group of people excluded from having access to the resources and the opportunities that come, to Liberians. Before it was the Congo versus native. If you're not native, you don't have access to, educational opportunities. You don't have access to, other things that as a citizen you have access to. And then it came down to, you crime, you're this, you tribal lines. And then we're having the issue of if you're not a citizen, you can't have access to job opportunities, you can't have access to scholarship. So all of those things. And he continues to say, we have consistently excluded a certain group of people from having access to the country's equal access to the country's resources that they're entitled to, and because that division has continued in our country for so long, we don't try to change it. We just try to change the players. Oh, today that our time, and we've heard other political leaders say that our time. Wait for your time. That not your time, and that is also our problem. And those are the things that he tends to change with the leadership that he intends to bring.
So talking about that, Mr. Cummings went on record for saying, "Hey, I will hire the smart and qualified Liberians, to get a job done." You had an opportunity to work in Ellen Johnson Sirleaf administration. She had the best and the brightest that Mr. Cummings is talking about. In her second term, they all went loose. It was like a, looting spree, and it's like she became incapable of holding them accountable. Would that not be a repeat or part two of Ellen in power? If
No,
Cummings is elected?
no, because that's how you learn from your mistakes. And I will also say why, it will not be because of what sets Mr. Cummings apart from a lot of other leaders, including Madam Sirleaf.
Mhm.
When you have been in the system for so long, there are people you owe things to. There are people you owe something to. IOUs, loyalty. Someone did something for you. Someone was there for you. Someone you feel like you owe something, some protection or whatever it is. Uh, for good or bad, Mr. Cummings does not have that.
You think that
Yeah,
contributed to Ellen's feeling on corruption?
that Madam Sarif had an interview recently with Raj Pujabi.
Mhm.
I'm sure you know the guy who runs. He was recently appointed by President Biden
Mhm.
um, 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 to head some health sector,
Okay.
but he's the head of last mile health in Liberia. But
Okay.
anyways, so he's a Liberian born Indian lineage, but
Oh
he
yeah,
had an
yes, I heard
interview.
about that appointment. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Raj.
Mhm.
But he had an interview with Madam Sharif recently, and do you know what she said? Her
No.
biggest regret is that she did not put some people in prison for corruption. In that interview, I got a link to it the other day. But so even she sees that as one of her biggest regrets. But part of why she could not have done that at the time was because you owe people, you feel like you owe people something. And that's part of why a lot of people in the system has this fear of Mr. Cummings is that this man can close his eye and come for you because you don't owe him nothing. You don't
Even
owe
though he
him.
won't close his eyes, right? When some
So
members of the
let me learn
different
now.
members of the CPP would not pay their dues, he wouldn't close his eyes to hold them
No,
accountable for
no,
due
but
payments, right?
but let me come to it. He were not the employees or employers. They were not his employees. They were not under his authority or leadership. We
That
did
is an
raise it.
excuse.
No, it's not an excuse. We raised the issue. We sent them a letter reminding them of their due payments within the CPP. But he wasn't unlike, as you explained, people he appoints, officials of his government who are answerable, accountable to him and working at his will and pleasure. He has that ability and capacity to take actions when they don't do what they're supposed to do. And he can do that because unlike other leaders, he does not have IOUs with these people. He does not, it's not like he owes them something or he owes them protection or anything. And that's something that even people within the system, whether it's the business sector, whether it's the political system, across the country, they have this fear that Mr. Cummings is that one person who can close his eyes and slash the hammer and really don't care who it lands on because there's nobody he's trying to protect. There's nobody he has any IOUs for. And most times, how do you have IOUs with people? They either did some favor for you before politically, or they funded your campaign, or they like this they have this relationship with someone that you know. And that's why he's also made it clear that his children are not going to be working in his government. That was also one of the flaws that people criticize Madame Shirley for, having her children work in her government. So these are things that makes Mr. Cummings different from other leaders. And so no, when he becomes president, and yes, he will seek the best minds because part of our issues today is the incompetence that the country is suffering from. So he will seek the best minds, like you said, from within Liberia
Mhm.
and even outside Liberia. But when they go wrong, when they do things they're not supposed to do, he will hold them accountable and he will take action
And,
without fear or favor.
and he been talking about, that they are pay also a living wage. Ellen
Living with.
tried that, and some people were getting, so much money, and yet they were stealing. So how is he going to, walk that fine line, paying them well at the same time, ensuring that they don't steal because people get comfortable, right?
Yes. And that's where the issue of the rule of law comes in. That's
Okay.
where the issue of strengthening accountability agencies like the
Mhm.
LACC, the
Mhm.
IAA, Public Procurement Concessions Commission. Those are integrity institutions that you have to strengthen to be able to not only audit or track or investigate, but to be able to come up with, facts in terms of what the actual issues are. And he said his government will persecute where the evidence lies, regardless of who it points to or not. So to do that, you have to go on the facts, not because Mariah could I say so, not because you think this is an opportunity to get her out of your way, not because you don't like her, but because the evidence shows that. And the only way you can be able to do that is when you empower and strengthen your integrity institutions, which is part of what he intends to do. But also, in terms of paying a living wage, it's not just for those at the higher level of government. He mentioned those even at the lowest level of government, whether it's the police officers, whether it's the teachers, whether it's the health workers. And he said something on his last interview, which you claim was a disaster, that look, the police officer who is not paid a living wage will stop your car to try to get by from you. The health worker who's not paid a living wage will sell the drugs from in the health center to support the family. The teacher who is not paid a living wage will bring, brochures or things to sell or take bribes for grades. None of these things are okay. But these things, some of them can be addressed if you're paying people a living wage, but also strengthening the systems that hold them accountable. And that has been part of our problem.
So plans. And before we go into a few of them, because of time, I told you, was it an hour and 15 minutes, I said? I don't want to take most of your time, your basic study. But plans, if you look at Mr. Cummings' plans that I'm sure you might have seen, do you see those plans as bold, robust, and realistic? Before we go into that, I just want to get your take. How will you describe them?
Realistic, yes. Bold and robust, yes. But you also have to think about what's practical. You got to walk before you fly, or you got to crawl before you walk and walk before you fly.
Okay.
But also what's practical within what we currently have.
So, sorry, any other place?
No, go ahead.
All right. So talking about that, we heard from Mr. Cummings that he's going to grow the budget to $1 billion. So when he said that, I said, whoa. You from corporate America managing billions? And you're looking at our problems here, and a single billion, you think that's going to call it? How? That is not bold for me. That is not bold. That is not robust. Does the man have ambition?
So, good question. But when he said this in 2016, people said, that is too ambitious. That is, how can he even do that? Where he's coming from with that? In fact, I was one of those who asked, how can you do that? And when you look at what our budget was, around 500,000, and you're thinking about doubling it to $1 billion. For most people, in fact, people say he can't do it. That's a lie. He can't do it. He's just talking, that political talk, that political rhetoric. So I'm really happy that today you're saying it's not ambitious enough, because what that tells you is people are now saying that, yes, it can be done. We've gone from saying it can be done. We've gone from saying, how do you intend to do it? We've gone to seeing CDC now saying that they're carrying it to 700 million.
Yeah, 785, they said.
And so from 7 to $1 billion now, we do see that it's highly possible, and now it's even.
And I am saying that is not bold enough.
That's what I'm saying. So now we're saying it's less ambitious. So what this tells you is the vision that he has, that he sees. People don't see it until they start to see that it's possible and that it can happen. And when it gets to that point, then they say, oh, it's not ambitious enough. Has CDC not moved the budget to 700 million as they claim they have? most people will still be at a point where they think 1 billion is too high. So yes, 2016, it seemed ambitious. 2022, maybe by 2023, maybe it will go, his goal will be to move it up to 2 billion. So maybe for you, it's not ambitious enough, it's not bold enough, because now you're seeing the budget at 700. So yeah, a little 300 million.
It's not because I'm seeing the budget.
300 million more is not that ambitious.
It's not
But
because
you're
I'm
right.
seeing the budget, Mariah, because
But
$1 billion is completely a drop in the bucket for the problems we have. And if anybody should have known that, that should be Mr. Cummings.
But Ansony, it was a drop in the budget for the problems that you have, but it's a drop in the bucket for your ability and capacity to achieve. So that's what you should be looking at. Like I said, it's not just about the plans, it's whether it's practical. So in terms of setting a budget for the country, Liberia's budget should be close to 10 billion. If we're speaking of addressing the problems that we have, but do we have the capacity to get it to 10 billion? Currently, there are several things and structures that need to be put in place for you to be able to grow your budget. We are not there yet. And so for where we are, 2 billion is something that it seems more practical. And with Mr. Cummings's vision, as he said, he has a roadmap on how you can even get to 1 billion.
And so let's talk about that roadmap. What is that roadmap?
Let's talk about the roadmap.
Let's talk about it. How is he going to grow this budget
to $1 billion?
$1 billion that which I think is a drop in the bucket and not ambitious enough.
Yeah, so like you said, that's, you think that, but I'm glad that other people think it was too ambitious, and I'm glad that we're getting to a point where we can now expand it to 1.5 or 2 billion. One of the things that he said that you have to look at, and I just want to talk about this before we go back to the roadmap. When you look at why, okay, so from a investor or business standpoint, when you think about investing in Liberia, the first question is, why Liberia? Why not Sierra Leone? Why not Ghana? Why not Ivory Coast? Why not Nigeria? Why not other countries within the region? They have better infrastructure. They have better roads. They have better electricity supply. They have better water supply. They have the basic infrastructure already in existence. It makes it easier for companies to come in and do business. So why Liberia? Why would a company bring
because and let me interject here. I read somewhere that when Mr. Cummings was head of Coca-Cola Africa, he had suggested to the board that they needed to go in a particular African country that was having conflict. And they were like, Alex, are you crazy? And he said, that's what I think. And they went there and the company became profitable. So if you ask the question, why not Ghana, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, I say, why not Liberia?
And that's what I'm saying, right? Mm-hmm. So the reason companies will look at other countries that have infrastructure and want to come into a country that does not have the infrastructure to support their investment can be two. Let me add two. One, trust and confidence in the leader. I know one of the things that Mr. Cummings has said to me in terms of his investments that he does is he says, Mariah, I don't invest in businesses. I invest in people. If a business came to pitch investment to me, yes, I will look at the numbers, I'll look at all of those things, but what will inform my decision to invest in that company or not is the person. So he invests in people. It's the same way businesses look at it. They invest in the leader of that country. Part of why we saw Madame Sieh was able to attract investors and concessions was because of the trust and confidence in the leader. Part of why we've not had investors come to Liberia under WEA is because they don't trust the leader. And also the system. We didn't have a perfect system under Madame Sieh, but we knew that we're building it. Under President WEA, we've retrogressed to immediate post-war status. All of our systems, our judicial system, accountability systems, all of those things have been broken, underfunded, and ineffective. So an investor who's coming to Liberia, look at a judicial system that they think a minister of state or a government official can pick up the phone and call a judge and tell him how to rule, or that the respect and sanctity of contract is not respected in that country. Nobody wants to put their money in there. So the first things that we have to address are those two things: the confidence in the leader and the confidence in the system. Now, a country, an investor who will leave countries like Ghana and Nigeria and other countries that have these systems or these leaders that just come to Liberia would do that when they have confidence in the leader, in the person, right? So that's one. Two, how does Mr. Cummings intend to do that? One, definitely improve investors' confidence in Liberia. That has to be done before you can even start to expect to have investments come in. Investors' confidence in Liberia has dropped. It's probably non-existent now in Liberia. And that's why we've not seen new companies coming, new concessions coming. Even existing companies are still having issues with government in terms of their concession agreements or the rights under the agreements, and we see the ArcelorMittal issue going on right now. So those are things that Liberians need to take very seriously, and that is one of the main ways you can create jobs, is by having investors come in and create jobs. Because at the end of the day, right now, and it's not only the government has been the largest employer, which puts a burden on our budget, which is why I told you, your budget, do you have the capacity to grow to 2 billion? Over 60% of your budget goes to payments of salaries. Over 60% of the budget. So whatever other 40% you have that goes to PSIPs, private sector investment projects, or infrastructure projects like roads and education and health and things that directly affect the lives of the people, is way less, because everything goes to salaries. And so to be able to grow your budget, you have to reduce the pressure on your budget. And to reduce that pressure on your budget that goes to salaries, you have to create alternative means of employment. That is where the private sector comes in. That is where investors' confidence comes in. And once you do that, then you can have more people leave government and work in these concession areas, in these manufacturing companies, in these factories that will be established, created, and that takes the burden off government. You make government smaller, and more of government's budget then gets to focus on PSIPs instead of just salaries and benefits. So that's one way to grow the budget. The second way is you have to cut waste. And he said that you have to cut waste. How do you cut waste? Several ways. One, you have to close the loopholes in our revenue generation systems.
For example,
if LRA is reporting revenue generated of 200 million or whatever, and there are loopholes where you cannot adequately assess what taxpayers are paying, or whether they're paying certain percentage directly to government and certain percentage to the tax collector themselves, then that's an issue. If they're paying directly, you can assess and monitor the taxes coming in. If tax collectors are giving discounts in taxes to businesses because they want to get a cut, and then a certain percentage go to government revenue, that's reducing your tax collected, your revenue generated. So you have to be able to identify and close the loopholes in our revenue generation system.
One of the loopholes, Mariah, is this duty-free privileges for
officials of government. Exactly.
Okay. So how is he going to do that?
I mean, it's
Cut
clear.
it off completely?
Well, you could do that, or you could limit it.
Okay.
Because you have to assess, part of, you also have to, and I tell people, even as a lawyer, law is reasoning. Sometimes when certain policies are put into place, you have to look at what's the reasoning behind that. Is it still applicable now? Right? Mm-hmm. Part of why the duty free, I believe, was given was because some of our officials, especially lawmakers, were bringing in things that were supposed to be used for their constituency, to aid their people. I know we see Senator Sir Joseph brings in a lot of humanitarian supplies and medical supplies and all of those things. So you do want to ease the burden on these lawmakers, especially when these things are being brought for the benefit of the people for
I
nonprofit
mean, we see that
reasons.
with some
But
businesses
let me
too,
name
right?
them. But
The
you also
fire
see
store.
that now they're using the
Mhm.
duty free, whether there's an abuse of the duty free, whether they're using it for personal things, whether they're using it as favors to people, whether they're having people pay them to use the duty free, all of those things you have to assess it. So yes, it is one of the loopholes, and that's part of why Mr. Cummings said identify the loopholes and close them. That will also help increase your revenue. So that's one way. The other way you also look at that is revisit concessions agreements. And in revisiting concession agreements, you want to know what's the capacity of the concessionaire to be able to employ more people. What do we have to do to allow them employ more people? Because then, Mr. Cummings has always said jobs, jobs, jobs. Job creation is one, which we'll get to his platform, is one of his pillars of his platform. Jobs, jobs, jobs. So what can we do? What can we give in exchange to concessions and concessionaires that can enable them to provide jobs for more people? So if they're hiring 1,000 persons, do we need, like you said, give them duty free, give them tax breaks, give them other things within our capacity and ability that cannot have them increase another 1,000, employ another 1,000? So the focus should be on job creation as well, because when you what people don't understand, if you give a concession tax breaks and they employ another 1,000, you also getting um, taxes from the salaries that they're paying. So you're not just necessarily getting a zero sum, you're still getting something in return, but you've also gained something in return because you have 1,000 more of your people employed. So
Like,
revisit concessions
mhm,
is also another way, and see if you're getting value for your resources and
mhm,
whether you can have more people employed. Invest in other sectors of our economy. It's not always mining, and stuff. There's agribusiness. There's the fisheries. There are other sectors that are not as expanded upon and developed. One of those sectors that he stresses on a lot is ecotourism. And the reason, other political leaders have said tourism, but he has said not tourism, ecotourism. And the difference is, with tourism, people are looking at 5 stars hotels and jacuzzis and like world class facilities that they want to come and enjoy and see on their vacations. It's high cost. Ecotourism is way less. It's low cost. It creates jobs as well, and it's easier to do. So, for example, what do we mean by ecotourism? Look at Jamaica, Caribbean, other countries, right? Their ecotourism is nature. You go into a woods, you go into a place, green area, whatever. They have huts. So, and I'll give an example in Liberia. And a lot of people who watch me probably know Lebasa Eco Lodge. It's ecotourism. It's low cost. Yes, they have the pool and stuff there, but look at the bungalows. It's made with local materials. It's made with wood. It's made with rattan, reed. It's local materials. Local people make those things. They get the contracts for it. It's creating jobs. They have people in the communities in Masha there who live in the communities, who working at the place at Lebasa Eco Lodge. But you go there, the electricity is solar. It's low electricity, so you're not using as much electricity. You're not looking for world class buildings and facilities. They're using lapas, um, how you call it, cloth for the bear sheets and stuff. So it's cheaper to run. You go to Nana's Lodge in Cape Mount. It's ecotourism as well. They have these planks. They use the wood to build the bungalows. The beds are made of wood. So these are the kind of things. And Liberia has vast land. We have waterfronts and rivers and oceans that you can, have these several resorts, ecotourism. So you invest in ecotourism, it's low cost and it creates jobs and it helps invest tourists come in and
mhm.
your tourism sector booms from just ecotourism. The other thing also and we talked about, is to invest in the private sector. You invest and expand the private sector to take the load off of government. And the more people you employ, the more taxes you can collect. These people, the more economic empowered they become, the more they build homes, the more they start businesses of their own, the more they employ other people. So you have someone who's working, but also started a small business and employing 5, 10 persons. The more they employ, or they will even employ domestic workers. And that domino effect of employment and expanding the private sector also helps to grow your budget. So these are some of the things in his roadmap of how to grow your budget, the country's budget, to $1 billion.
Thank you so much. I like that I gave you more time to explain that.
And thank you for not interrupting me. Thank you.
And so what I want to know is growing the budget using all these means, it can be the only plan for Mr. Cummings, right? And so not going into the other things because of time, where are Mr. Cummings' plans right now? Are they all written and ready and accessible anywhere that Liberians can go and read?
So currently they're available. We can send out copies, but we're working on launching his website. Mm-hmm. I think they're also available on the ANC Global website, the Mr. Cummings plans, but for his own website, so working on the Cummings, his a personal website.
This has been one of my qualms this has been one of my qualms with the whole ANC thing, right? So the ANC Global, it's a political party, because anytime I ask for Mr. Cummings' plan, they say go ANC Global. What is the ANC Global, and what is the
ANC Global is the same way you get CDC USA. It's the same way you get UP USA. Okay. That our own ANC.
So it's an auxiliary of the ANC.
But the difference is ANC. The reason it's ANC Global is not just restricted to USA. Okay. So it's globally all of ANC's structures across the world. So you have ANC in the UK, let's just say Europe, the European chapter. So those in the UK, those in other countries in the UK.
And it's a political.
Of course, it's attached to a political party, but it's also registered with FARA under the U.S. government, where they can raise funds for political activities. So they're also our fundraising arm as well as our diaspora arm. So you have the ANC chapter in China, ANC chapter in Ghana, ANC chapter in Europe, ANC chapter now I think is being formed in Canada. So globally, all of the ANC chapters are under ANC Global. They all have it. Even within the US, they have regional chapters with several states. So the Midwest is a regional chapter, and then states within the Midwest has ANC chapter, and they all work on a global. So global is Jahayaga, UP USA, CDC USA, that are on the ANC group. So yes, they have a website that is up and running. And so there's information about the party on that website. Jihad CDC USA will have the CDC platform and all that stuff. But we're also building a website for Mr. Cummings process. So on that website, we also have this stuff. But we also have them available that we have, for example, I'll show you something. We have these. These are just the pictorials and stuff on his platform that we easily send out for people who want to just have an overview. And then we have the detailed platform that we can also send out. But it's also being worked on and tweaked a little bit as well for 2023. So yes, it's available.
Yeah, and concerning those plans right there you just showed me, I think someone sent me a copy before. I will really appreciate anybody from your team, who can come so that we can have a conversation on that. That would be important because of time, Mariah.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, let's do this. So all of these plans are all good. They sound good. And I don't want you to respond to this, but let me say that look at all of the things that you articulated, tourism, ecotourism, the private sector, talking about bringing investment. And you look at all of that, and I look at Ellen Johnson's administration, we said, well, there was $16 billion, what they call it, FDI. I mean, that is not actually physical money that came in the country, but that was
indirect investment.
Right. So if you look at that and then you say, well, I'm going to grow the budget to just 1 billion, I'm like, he's underestimating what possibly can be achieved here. So maybe that's something you people need to look at. But let's go to this final aspect here. The ability to win. All these plans would mean nothing, would just be, cashing doors if Mr. Cummings can win. Is Mr. Cummings a winnable candidate? Knowing what we know, the political variables, the narrative against him. This is the final segment here. Is Mr. Cummings a winnable candidate, Maura?
Absolutely, yes. And I say that with all humility.
And so how is he going to do it?
And with facts. And I'm glad that we're going to discuss it today. Mm-hmm. But before we get into that, let me just say, if Mr. Cummings is going to win, he will not be going through any of what he's going through right now. Nobody throws rock at an empty tree. If you're not a threat to Liberian politicians, they don't care about you. If you're not a threat to the system, they don't give two looks your way. There is absolutely no way that people would think Mr. Cummings does not have a winning path to the presidency, and yet he's the most sought after, the most criticized, the most attacked, the most targeted opposition political leader, because they do know and recognize that he has a pathway to the presidency that is a threat to them. So let's just clarify that. Remember in 2017, we had 22 candidates. Why isn't anybody talking about anybody else out of the 22? Why isn't...
People are talking about Mr. Barker?
No, man. We already know that Mr. Boyka and Josh Weir are the popular candidates. Okay. Outside of them. Mm-hmm. Why are they not talking about all the other 22? I mean, you had, Mills Jones, you had Magdala Cooper, you name them, over 22, right? But the point I'm getting to is mm-hmm. people are talking about that because they have, hold on one second. Mm-hmm. They have all of these other candidates that nobody's talking about but Mr. Cummings. So that should tell you that there's something there. And so when you hear the propaganda that he can win, his pathway is to be vice president and blah, 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 and stuff like that, it's all propaganda. So let's talk about Mr. Cummings' pathway. In talking about Mr. Cummings' pathway, one of the things that people don't realize is that Mr. Cummings came to 2017 elections less than 2 years, 18 months about to the elections. He had not been in Liberian politics. He had not been, hold on a second. Okay. He had not been in Liberian politics. He had not been, like I said, his name was not all over the place or well known, but he came 18 months and he came 5th out of 22 candidates. But what people don't know and realize is he didn't just come 5th out of 22 candidates in less than 18 months. He came 3rd in 7 out of 15 counties. And 3rd, that means he beat Liberty Party in 7 out of 15 candidates. And we know Liberty Party and Councillor Bromsky have been around for over 15 years. Mm-hmm. And this is someone who came less than 2 years too. So that general appeal, and we'll talk about that because it goes back to when people talk about he doesn't have a base. That general appeal that he came with cut across every base, cut across every county. Yes, Mr. Cummings is the underdog, or started off as the underdog. But that does not dispute the fact that his pathway to the presidency is real and clear. So let's talk about the 7 counties. Of those 7 counties, Monserrato, Nima, Bon, 3 of the 6 big counties, he won Liberty Party in. Monserrato, he came 3rd with 10% of the votes. Liberty Party has 7% of the votes. And the reason I'm using Liberty Party is because people say, it was the 3rd largest party and it had been around for a long time. So UP was the ruling party at the time. CDC was the largest opposition party, and then there was the third largest party, the Liberty Party, that had been around for a long time. So I'll compare, and that's why I'm using that. So he won Monserrate County, 10% of the votes. People don't understand that Mr. Cummings got 10% of Monserrate County in 2017. Maryland, of course, is his home county. He got 26% of the votes. He even won Unity Party in Maryland County, which was a ruling party. We have won Maryland County because the Southeasterners have been accustomed to voting for him. He was a Southeastern candidate. But the ruling party lost to Mr. Cummings in Maryland. He got 26% of the votes in Maryland. People say, oh, he couldn't even win Maryland alone.
So why couldn't Mr. Cummings win Maryland? He too is in the Southeastern.
But that's what I'm saying. This is somebody who came to the elections about 18 months to the elections.
Okay.
So let's not forget that in comparison to other political leaders and parties who've been around for Unity Party been around since 1984. 1984, Unity Party been around. In 2005, 2011, Unity Party formed a merger of 3 parties. So Unity Party is currently 3 parties. Liberty Party been around since what, 97? 2005? 97, I think. CDC been around since 2005. These are established parties. The ANC came around 2013, right? ANC less than even, 8, 9, 10 years old. So Mr. Cummings as the candidate came 2016, less than 18 months to elections. And he was able to get 26% of the votes in Maryland County, beating the ruling Unity Party in Maryland. Let's go to Nimba of Vote-Rich County. He got over 5% of the votes. He got 6.2% of the votes in Nimba, beating LP that got 4.5%.
It might be difficult there now because Tier 1 is in the mix.
But that's a different conversation. We'll get to that, right?
Okay.
So let's look at Bond County. Mr. Cummings got 5.5% of the votes in Bond. That's another vote-rich county. Liberty Party got about 5.2. Bomi, he got 7.5% of Bomi. Sino, River G, he got 5%. Sino, he got 2%. Liberty Party got 1.7. The reason I'm saying this is because people don't understand that, yes, Mr. Cummings came 5th, but he came 3rd in almost 50% of the country.
But you need a strategy to grow those percentages you just named in those counties.
Right. Exactly my point. So that's what we're getting to. So, but you first have to start with a baseline, right? And it's the baseline that I'm giving you. So this is someone who came to an election of 22 candidates in less than 2 years and won 50% across the country. Came 3rd, 50% across the country. But in aggregates, he came 5th because Prince Johnson Nimba and Charles Bromskin, Baza Belt pushed them up. But across the country, so this speaks to his general appeal. This speaks to the fact that his base is.
You need to clarify that. How could he have won 50% across the country and
I said came 3rd.
Okay, 3rd. Okay.
Yeah, came 3rd in 50% across the country.
Okay, 3rd.
No, he didn't win.
Okay.
So now let's talk about since 2016, 2017. What have we seen Mr. Cummings do across the country? Mr. Cummings is the only political leader that has been to all 15 counties since 2017. Not even the president has been to all 15 counties. Mr. Cummings has been to all 15 counties. He's remained engaged with the people in all 15 counties. He has ANC party offices established in over 12 of the 15 counties.
So that is a guarantee vote?
No, it's not. We're talking about what has he been doing. First of all, nothing is guaranteed. That's the first baseline. Nothing's guaranteed, right? Even Unity Party 400,000 votes, they said they got last elections. It's not guaranteed.
So you can't bet on that.
Exactly. So the point I'm raising is we're looking at the work that has been done because we're now looking at the pathway. We've started with the baseline with what he did 2017 as a new kid on the block, as they would say. What the baseline is, what he's been doing since 2017. He's the only political leader that has visited all 15 counties across the country and maintained activities in these counties across the country. Let's also look at what our voting trend has been.
Okay.
Liberia, of a 5 million population, we have about 3 million people who are eligible to vote.
To vote. Okay.
About 3 million. Out of that 3 million, from 2005, 2011, 11 to 2017, you've had only about 1.2 to 1.6 actually register. 1.2 to 1.6 actually register. About 800,000 who registered to vote, 800 to a million who registered to vote, they don't show up to vote.
So
They
Mr.
don't.
Cummings is going to make them to vote for him?
But you have to look at what you play into, right? They don't show up to vote. Then there's another 900,000.
And one of the reasons they don't show up to vote is the distrust. They don't trust the politician. And what's happening now is that the whole opposition bloc is being put in one basket, and Mr. Cummings is in the mix. So if they had to say no, how will he be an exception?
So let's get to that when we do. So then you have about 900,000 who are eligible to vote, but they don't register to vote. They don't register to vote at all. So between those who register and don't vote, and those who don't register at all, you have over almost 2 million people, right? Now, the strategy towards that is, like you said, they don't register because they're disenchanted, because they don't trust the people. Now you have the opposition. But we also now have a situation where the Liberian people understand you have to make choices. This is not a choice of or pool of angels. You have, as a voting population, to make choices. And the 2023 elections will be based on 3 choices. Not boycott, not Weah, not Cummings. It will be based on the past, on the present, and on the future. If Liberians want to go back to the past, which is represented by the UP and Ambassador Boycott, that's a choice that they will have to make. If they want to stay with the present, in the present situation in the country that they're suffering from, that the Weah government and Weah represents, that's a choice they will have to make. Or do they want to go with the future? In a better future, what Liberians can come together as one and address the issues affecting them and improve their lives and grow our economy and create jobs for our people.
And who is that future?
And that's Mr. Cummings.
You think they see him?
They do. And that's why he's one of he's the most targeted opposition leader at this point. So the elections in 2023 will be about the past, the present, and the future. That's 2. 3, let's also go to the issue of who votes for Mr. Cummings. Who does his message appeal to? Who are some of the supporters that you see around Mr. Cummings in terms of those who show their support for him? Basically, you have a lot of young people and you have a lot of women. Now, our support base, Mr. Cummings, the support base that Mr. Cummings enjoys with young people and women also includes young professionals. And most of these
people at the gatherings. We don't see these people at the
Ansony, let me get to it.
I've given you enough time, right? We don't see these people.
Let me get to it.
Hold on.
No. Let me get to it.
I've given you sufficient time. I'm being fair to you, but yeah, I've been fair to you here. You know, you have to look for the indicators. I've listened to you patiently. You're giving some numbers. And, you know, and I like that. That means you guys have been analytical here, looking at these trends, the numbers, and all that. But where are the indicators? That's what I'm looking at. So here's the thing: when Bernie Sanders was running, we saw the crowd. When Trump was running, we saw the crowd. When Weah was running, we saw the crowd, and we saw the political dividend thereafter. We don't see the crowd with Mr. Cummings. So his presence, doing goodwill out there, I don't see the crowd. Talk to me.
Okay, I can respond now.
And I said I was getting there, but you won't let me get there. So again, I started off with who are the people, the support base. You see, Mr. Cummings is young people and women. Young people or women are generally the supporters of Mr. Cummings, but they're not the only. I mentioned the young professionals. The issue with young professionals is you will not see these people out in the crowd. These are the people who compose mostly of what we call the silent majority. These are not the people that will be calling on radio stations. These are not the people that will be calling on talk shows. These are not the people that you see out in the streets or at rallies or showing up. You will not see them. That does not mean that they don't exist. These are the people who understand what it means for the economy to work. These are the people who understand what it means to have an effective leader. These are the people who understand what it means for career growth. And these are the people who generally supports Mr. Cummings as well. Another group of people who support Mr. Cummings that you will never see outside is the disenfranchised and disenchanted seditionists. They're more likely to support Mr. Cummings than they are to support the Unity Party if they're not going to support Mr. Weir. And these are the people that you will not see come out to say, I support Cummings. You will not see them calling radio shows. You will not see them in rallies.
What are they hiding?
But
everyone,
Ansony,
everyone who supports that person, they don't hide.
Ansony, it's not about hiding. What has crowd politics done for us in Liberia? Everybody can pull crowd. When Mr. Cummings came from his visit, when he had that event at Liberty Party headquarters, he pulled crowd from the airport straight to Liberty Party headquarters. When Mr. Cummings launched, when the ANC was launching their campaign at ATS in 2017, you saw the crowd. When Mr. Cummings went to Nima the other day to support the CPP candidate at the time, you saw the crowd. You can pull crowd out. It's not about the crowd because
it's money or winning 2 years, Mariah.
The same crowd, I'll get to that. The same crowd that comes out for Cummings can be the same crowd that comes out for Boycott, the same crowd that comes out for Weir. What matters is who votes. It's who votes.
Fair enough.
Because at the end of the day, it's the votes that count. It's not the hair count of the crowd. You don't go to election and say, okay, who all support Ansony stand behind him? That counts. Who all support we are stand behind him? No. So someone can be, claiming that they're we are supporter or UP supporter or Cummings supporter, and they go into that ballot. And when they cast the ballot, that's what the Constitution protects, the secret vote. So it's the vote that counts. But let's also talk about another group of people that you see as well, the first-time voters. What the benefits of these first-time voters are, they don't have people they've ever voted for. They don't have, and first-time voters, people will say, oh, first-time voters has to be people who just turned 18, 20, 21. First-time voters can be a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old who decided they were not going to vote in the past.
These people?
I'm sorry?
Are you engaging these people?
We are. We are. And matter of fact, I'm not going to sit there and discuss our strategy in terms of recruitment and mobilization, but these people have also been very receptive to us because what Mr. Cummings represents to them is a brighter future for Liberia and for themselves. So most of our young people, they're very technology savvy now. They're on Facebook, they're on the internet, they're watching movies and Netflix, and they see how other young people in other countries are advancing. They want that. They know they're not getting it under Weir. They know they didn't get it under UP, and they will not get it under UP. But they see the message that Mr. Cummings is pushing about real change is coming, and his experience that he has in building the private sector and creating jobs. They want that. And so they're more receptive to his messages and to supporting him. I will find it difficult to see an 18, 19-year-old supporting Ambassador Boyka, who will be turning 80 in 2023. That's why Weir was able to attract most of the young people votes as well, because he provided that youthful exuberance that they needed. But the difference is he was not competent to do the job that they wanted. They liked him, of course. With Mr. Cummings, they like him, but they also know that he's capable and competent of doing what they want the president to do. So that's it. And lastly, collaboration of other parties. We cannot dispute the fact that CPP not existing as it started with the 4 parties does not mean that CPP will not exist or that other parties will not endorse Yes,
Isn't
there
a
are other
grand
parties who will
image?
endorse the UP. Yes, there are other parties who will endorse the CDC, and there are other parties who will endorse Mr. Cummings. So when you're looking at the pathway to Mr. Cummings' victory, you have to look at the baseline where he started off, that this is somebody who came third in 50% of the country, across the country. This is somebody who has remained engaged with his people across the 15 counties, the only political leader who has gone to all 15 counties in the last 5 years. This is somebody who attracts young people and women and voting population that generally will not be public, what they call the silent majority, the young professionals and disenfranchised citizens. And this is somebody who has to appeal across tribal, religious, and political lines, which is why when they talk about base, he's always said his base is not tribal, his base is on young people, his base is on women, his base is on disenfranchised Liberians, his base is on poor Liberians, people who receive his messages of economic growth, building the private
Another
sector,
group of
and
people,
creating jobs.
another group of people I want to bring to your attention before we get to the CPP and to close, because we're going to 2 hours now. We can't go past that.
Oh yeah,
It's the diaspora. The diaspora, that's that group of people who have influence on family members on the ground who can take food and say, hey, can you go this way? Let me share my personal experience with you. I'm from Southtown, where Joshua is from. I'm the only member of my family who has seen serious opposition. Even my father, who I'm responsible for, told me, son, if you will not send that money, don't send it. So it's Mr. Cummings banging on the diaspora to influence, support to him. And how is he going to tap into that?
I don't talk about the diaspora. I didn't talk about the diaspora because it goes without saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people, even in Liberia, will say, "Oh, Mr. Cummings is a diaspora president. If he had elections in the diaspora today on Facebook, Mr. Cummings will win." What they don't understand is, like you said, the impact of the diaspora on our local elections, whether it's with influencing family members on how to vote, whether
Right.
it's funding the candidate. And the ANC has the strongest, the largest, the most involved and committed diaspora base, not just in Liberia, like in the US, as I mentioned, but across Europe, Canada, Ghana, and even China. We
I
have
see why I always getting some bullets when I go to war.
we have a chapter in China as well. So for Liberians who are living in China and Asia. So, and it's expanding. Every day we get people sending us messages. Oh, I'm in this country. And do you have an ANC chapter here? How can we? And people want to support. So, and the reason why Mr. Cummings appeals to the diaspora, and I have to say this, Ansony, is they recognize what it takes. And I'm sure you can agree with that, what it takes to be able to rise in corporate America to that level. It wasn't because he was a Black man. It wasn't because he knew somebody at the company. It wasn't because his pa recommended him. It wasn't because of anything but his hard work, his integrity, his performance in providing results at the workplace. That's how he was able to rise to the number 2 of a Fortune 500 global company. It is not magic. It is sacrifice. It is commitment. It is hard work. It is consistency. And those are values that we want in our president. And that is why you have this massive support from the diaspora around Mr. Cummings. And people say, is it that diaspora party? Is it that diaspora party? But they know and recognize the value that Mr. Cummings brings and how that value translates to
I
being
will
the
also
president.
say, Mariah, when DeLong was running, I don't know how, for some reason, this guy kind of made sense to a critical guy like me. I got 15% to vote for this guy.
Yeah.
I am on his back, and his fans are hitting me for it. So I
And-
cannot dismiss what the diaspora can do.
Right. And that support base that Dylan enjoyed, majority was from the ANC Global. They can dispute it all they want, but majority was from the ANC Global. And also take into consideration that ANC won 10% of the votes in Monserrate in 2017, even on the ground. So the 10% of ANC supporters in Monserrate that overwhelmingly supported Dillon, there are more ANC supporters, there are more Mr. Cummings supporters in Monserrate than there were Liberty Party supporters. But Mr. Cummings was able to get his support base to rally around and support Dillon. I know that even outside of the CPP, ANC people had pickups, had how do you call it? They mounted speakers going into the communities and encouraging people to turn out and vote for Dillon. So that
And
massive support from
it will,
both the
it will even
diaspora and from
surprise you.
Monserrate.
It will even surprise you. George Lobo is watching. I have to be the one to convince George Lobo to even campaign for Dillon. And, you know, and so, but we have to close. Let's talk about the CPP. Mr. Cummings, I can pull it this way, is like the only man in the CPP now, if I can pull it that way. By that I mean, you know, he and Mr. Barker were running, and he's 11. What does he do with the CPP as one of the strategies, you know, to the executive mansion? What is he going to do with the CPP?
That's for you to see. No, but
Are you going to hide that one too?
No. I'm saying that's for you to
What is
see.
he going to do?
But on a serious note, like Mr. Cummings said, the idea of the CPP, the ideals of the CPP still exist. And, you know, the CPP is like a vehicle coming from, say, Bassa to Monrovia. If the vehicle breaks down, you don't leave it on the side of the road. You repair it. If the tire busts, you get a new tire. Or if the pump spoil, you change the pump, you do what you need to do, and you continue on your journey. So,
Can you pick up passengers?
It is, I'm sorry?
Can you pick up passengers along the way?
You can, exactly. And he mentioned that.
Well, let's talk about the passengers that
you know, because when the bus breaks down, some passenger can get on different car and go. So when you finish fixing it, you gotta pick up new. Exactly. You gotta pick up new passengers and you continue your journey, which is why he continues to say that the ideals of CPP still lives. And so what he's going to do with CPP is for like people to see, right? But the other thing we have to note is Mr. Cummings' chairmanship of the CPP was the first chairmanship after the CPP was born. So CPP given to Mr. Cummings was a baby. And it was under his chairmanship that what CPP became. CPP became an alternative for the Liberian people. CPP was vibrant. CPP sent candidates to the elections and won the majority of the seats. And it wasn't by magic. It was by leadership. I know many days, there are times that some of our officials and ANC parties will say, Mr. Cummings putting too much focus on CPP and not the party and stuff. And I said, look, Mr. Cummings has to do what he has to do.
It was about collaboration too, isn't it?
It was about collaboration. But he was the chair of CPP at the time, and he led on these collaborations. Most of the things that CPP had to do, as we all know, other parties were not paying dues. So Mr. Cummings generally funded the CPP, while other parties could not. The ANC paid their dues. The ANC, as member of the CPP, did what they could do for the CPP. Even the legal challenges that the CPP put up to the government, I remember on the extension the extension of the elections and other legal issues that we went to court for around the CPP. It was under Mr. Cummings. The referendum that the government lost on, the mobilization and stuff around that referendum, it was under Mr. Cummings, and we got the results that we wanted. So it was under his leadership, and that the essence of the CPP rotating the chairmanship was for Liberians to see the leadership style and skill of every other political leader. And we saw what happened to the CPP under Madam Yombli Kanga Lawrence, and we saw what happened to the CPP under Ambassador Boyka. Matter of fact, he was still chair of the CPP when they broke up the CPP. So this is a testament of what leadership is, and how when you're giving something that is new to formed, how do you build that? So now, even though CPP has had its issues and we are where we are, that leadership skill that Mr. Cummings has is still there. And so what happens and becomes of CPP is only for the Liberian people to know and see.
Thank you. And we will take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be getting your closing statement. Folks, stay tuned for the closing, and we will be right back. All right, folks, thanks for staying with us here. At this time, I will get back to my guest. That is Anthony Morara Yakula, former Chief of Office Staff to Mr. Alexander Benedict Cummings. The topic we have been discussing is Mr. Alexander Benedict Cummings, the political leader slash presidential hopeful. Well, Mariah, I've heard a lot from you, Liberians listening as well. I hope we can find time out of your busy schedule to do this again. So going forward, what should we expect from Team Cummings as Team Cummings marches to the executive mansion?
As always, expect a committed leader of Team Cummings. Expect an honest leader of Team Cummings. Expect a visionary from our leader of Team Cummings, someone who is committed to ensuring that we change. I hate to use this word because I think it's overused, the trajectory of our country's path to development and reconciliation and unity and progress. Because at the end of the day, Ansony, we're not we're not a newly independent country. We're heading. We just celebrated our bicentennial, but if you're going to look at, when we got our independence from 1847, even we're heading 200 years, and we're the least developed. We're the, one of the most corrupt nations. We are poorly educated, have a high illiteracy rate. We have a high unemployment rate. We, by all, economic indicators, we are at the bottom of the barrel, globally and in terms of our counterparts in the region and across the continent. And part of our problems has definitely been lack of leadership, divisions within in different groups and sectors. And we as Liberians have an opportunity to choose a different kind of leader. We've chosen people with the same skills, the same politicians over and over, people who spend 40 years in public sector with nothing to account for, people who, been ruling parties 2 terms, people who have been in the political system for years and ingrained in the system because the system, and wants the system to remain the same because it benefits them and their families alone. This is time for Liberians to look at this person and say, look, we know, that you're not perfect. He's never claimed to be perfect, but you haven't been part of the corrupt system. You haven't, been a part of this political elites and space that have continuously kept the country in a place that only benefits them. And you're here to provide the kind of leadership that we need to move the country forward. And I tell you, Ansony, that, like you said earlier in our conversation, Mr. Cummings could be enjoying himself somewhere else. Mr. Cummings could be on vacation. Like you said, he's blessed enough to live a good life. Why does he want to do this? Because he believes in the Liberian people, and he believes that they deserve better. And what we've had over the last 170 plus years is not what we deserve. And say what you want about Mr. Cummings, but he's proven to be a leader that is very goal-oriented, results-oriented. He does what needs to be done. He's remained honest. And this whole thing about, the framework document, we didn't discuss it, and I hope at some point we'll discuss it. It's just another political ploy by opposition leaders like Mr. Ewer and Mr. Boykai and the government that they're working with to ensure that Mr. Cummings, who they say do not have a pathway to the president, is taken out of the race. If someone doesn't have a pathway, why do you want him out of the race? Why are you going to bring up bogus charges that you cannot prove for over 4 months? That today we have the Attorney General asking the Solicitor General to show the evidence that he's using to prosecute Mr. Cummings, that they've not been able, that they've asked Mr. Cummings to provide evidence against himself, that they've not been able to prove any of these charges of forgery or criminal conspiracy. And mind you, they're just even on forgery, which is a documentary trial that you just have to look at the documents and it's there, that there's no forgery. But they've not even done the criminal conspiracy aspect of it either, because there was no criminal conspiracy. So we have this thing that's been going on for 4 months only because certain politicians felt entitled to the CPP standard bearership. And when it was time to go for primaries, we didn't have any issue until it was time to go for primaries, because we didn't meet consensus on crowning and anointing and endorsing Ambassador Boycott instead of going through the process that we agreed on. All Mr. Cummings had ever asked for is that we go through the process that we agreed on in selecting the standard bearer, that nobody goes to a competition and say, I'll just come second. Liberia does not, even as badly managed our Lone Star is. When we go into the CAF, the African Cup of Nations, we don't say we just want to go second. Everybody goes into a competition to want to win. And it's only fair that you let the process play out. And when you think you cannot win your opponent, it is despicable, it is disingenuous to even come up with any kind of bogus charges and crimes and lies and propaganda against this person, only because you're not confident enough that you can win this person at a fair process. They started with the block voting and it died a natural death. And so the only other option was to lie about the framework document so that they can get out of it and blame someone for something that never happened. At the end of the day, the facts are on our side. The law is on our side. The Liberian people have seen for themselves. The Solicitor General has himself confessed that they initially quashed this thing because there was no evidence, and then it was brought back, allegedly, according to him, by the Minister of Justice. The Minister of Justice has said it's not true. So you have all of this rigmarole going on. And lastly, I just want to say that the former Vice President, a statesman, is now going to be a state witness on Monday to testify for the government against Mr. Cummings in this bogus political case, his main opposition contender. That says a lot. But this is the moment we've been waiting for, so the Liberian people can hear the truth and see the truth on cross-examination. Because that bad boy called cross-examination has a way of exposing the lies. And I'm happy that you have me on the show today. I'm happy that I was able to talk about Mr. Cummings' plans for our country. I'm happy that I was able to talk about, how he intends to do what he says he's going to do, and the kind of person that Mr. Cummings is, the man that Mr. Cummings is, and the leader that Mr. Cummings is, and how he's been able to build a team of committed, loyal, vocal base in the diaspora in Liberia, and people who believe that Mr. Cummings is the kind of leader we need, because Liberia deserves better. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and I'm glad and happy too that I'm not thin-skinned, just as you had thought, right?
No, that you sell a tin skin. Me, but I can just be here.
All right.
Anything you throw at me, I take it.
All right, Mariah, thanks for coming. I appreciate the conversation. Again, I hope we can find time to do it again. And thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right. So, folks, this is how I will close it. Mr. Alexander Benedict Cummings, he came 18 months before the 2017 elections. He announced that he wanted to be president. He gave it his all. He landed short. He stayed in Liberia. He still is. There were a lot of things thrown at him, that he was a U.S. citizen. He said, and I quote, "I am a Liberian with a U.S. passport." He went into that election. He came fifth in the general elections. He stayed around. He joined the CPP. Many felt that that was his greatest mistake. A decision he and his team continued to explain. In their calculation, it was never wrong, that it was a mandate from the Liberian people, that the entire opposition community came together to do that. And so for them, whether or not some players have some questionable characters, they didn't matter much. That's what they felt, that that did not matter much. And that it needed to be part of a team of opposition political parties to provide an alternative. Fast forward, he got accused of altering a document and committing forgery. Fast forward, he got in court, a court case that hangs on his head today. Yet, he said, "I'm still running for president and no one's going to stop me." Two of the other parties left the CPP. For Liberty Party, half of the Liberty Party claimed to have left from the CPP. So he's left in the CPP with his political party and a piece of Liberty Party. What is he going to do with that CPP? Will tell us his chances. Is he going to grow it? Is he going to be the only man in there? Is he going to collaborate with other political parties? We are told he has money. We are told he has traveled this country. We are told he has visited a lot of people and is doing everything to win Liberians on his side. We are told he has a message. Is that message resonating with the people? Are the people buying that message? And will that message be a catalyst to the promised land? The name Cummings, some people say he's a stranger. How come this guy is a stranger when he is like you as a Liberian? But that is why some people believe. That is a narrative he has to do something about. Is he doing something about it enough? Some people accuse him of being desperate. Is that even true? When one runs for president, is that desperation? These and many other things are the things that he had to combat. How he combat those things, again, how he combats those things will decide where he goes. Folks, the song says we are all Liberians, and that song is going to close us now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. And enjoy the song, We Are All Liberian.
We are Liberian. Liberia is our home. Liberian people. Liberia.